I'm David Bishop, and I'm currently involved with the Genealogical Society of South Brevard. And we work out of the Melbourne Library off of Fee Avenue. And so I help people when they come into the library to use the facility to find out information about their family. And so I'm going to tell you about a little bit about what goes on in genealogy today. First, I want to let you know I've been doing this since I was in my 20s, which is a little unusual.
And you're 40 now.
I'm 65. And so I've been doing this for quite some time. And I tell you, in my 20s, if I had known what would be available to me on the computer and all the kind of technology there is for genealogy, I wouldn't have bothered until now. After all, I did all the work in libraries on my countless hours in front of a microfilm reader. It's a lot of work, but now it's much more faster, more efficient. What used to take me sometimes days to do, just take me seconds to do. And it's getting better and better and better. I don't know if you guys have access to computers. Do you have a computer in your rooms?
No.
Yes and no?
There's one in the hallway out here too.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The last time I was here, we talked about writing stories for the benefit of our children or nieces or nephews or whatever, posterity. I'm a writer. Like she writes novels and things like that. I write. And so a lot of people do that. They write. And that's what I do. I've never published a book, but I write things that get in the genealogical bulletin, and then I put it on the computer so that other people can see. You have a story.
I was a writer most of my life. I've written thousands of novels, textbooks, proposals, things like that. And so I've been writing an autobiography of myself and my wife starting in 1900. And I'm up to approaching 400 pages now. And I've actually published to my family, all my kids and my grandkids and their kids, the first two sections, which is about 120 pages. And some of them are reading it, some of them aren't, but the ones that are reading it, I've had positive feedback. They like it because it's telling about their history. And
Yes.
And right now, what I've published to them only goes to about when I was born. So I haven't gotten approached where it addresses them. This is all started in 1900. Grandparents and great-grandparents and that sort of stuff, how they immigrated to the country. And
Oh, it started. Then you weren't born in 1900.
No. No, but I have a lot of information where there's a couple of people in the family that do genealogy, and they have talked to us over the years about my wife's family and my family. We've never done any genealogy with my family, but I have a niece that went back and traced our family from Italy back in 1900 when they immigrated, and so we have that information. So I've included all that in the book. If I work on it every day, I probably work 4 hours every day on it on my computer.
You don't have to be a writer to do genealogy. What a lot of people do is they go on Ancestry and they find out who their ancestors are, and it's a computer, it's a website that helps you do this. It goes into, let's say you're working on a great-grandfather, and so it'll bring up records that prove that this is your great-grandfather. And then you can go back further by these records. You don't have to be a writer. I write because I enjoy it. But other people, a lot of times they go on these sites and they'll find an obituary or a newspaper article and they just put it in the person's file on the computer. Have any of you been on Ancestry? How about other sites like My Heritage or Family Search? Have you been on Family Search?
I want to make a side comment. No, I haven't, to answer your question. But last year I got a very nice cover letter and 3 or 4 pages of, you call them, when you put the ancestry in lines.
Tree.
Family Tree?
Tree, that's what I'm talking about. From a cousin that I hadn't seen in years. She's deceased now. And that, one of them went back to 1600.
They go back.
So answer your question, I haven't done it, but I assume she had some means of getting all this stuff.
Yes. A lot of it is on the computer.
A lot of the information that they.
Grave sites. Now a lot of it is on the computer, the grave sites. It's called Find a Grave, and you can actually get a picture. They have they have kids, church groups, Boy Scouts, people like that who have gone to graveyards, taken a picture of the stone, and then it's like you type it in and it comes up, a picture of the stone. It's really interesting. If you ever go to, just when you get a chance to go on your phone or a device, or just type in find a grave. It's kind of interesting. And you can find people you might have known way long ago. And there's a lot of interesting things that they have on the internet. So you don't have to travel. But I will share with you my recent travel to Rochester, New York a couple weeks ago. I flew up, and it was a branch of the family. Name is Comstock, and this Laura Comstock married a guy named Richmond, and they lived pretty much most of their lives in the city of Rochester. And she was about the same age as Susan B. Anthony, and went to the same Unitarian church that Susan B. Anthony went to. And I didn't have any proof that she had anything to do with Susan B. Anthony, but I got a picture of Susan B. Anthony's gravestone in the cemetery up there at an angle, and I could see the Richmond family stone maybe 3 lots away. Okay, and this is in a cemetery of 375,000 people buried. There are more people buried in that cemetery than they're currently living in the city of Rochester. And but what I did do is I went to the University of Rochester. In their library, they had a rare book collection where they had lots of files and stuff, and I got to go through the Unitarian Church records there, and all I discovered was that the family was very active in the Unitarian. And I'm not a Unitarian, but it was popular back there, and in the 1880s was very liberal, very progressive. Their daughter was married by a minister who basically had pro-Darwin lectures at the church, which was a controversy back in those days, in the 1880s. And there's a number of other things. And I got to see the Sunday school ledger, where their kids almost every Sunday went to Sunday school. And it listed the name of the Sunday school teacher and stuff like that. And I just thought it was really interesting. So they also got involved with other things in the church. Their names were on there. So they must have known Susan B. Anthony. And how close, I don't know. But I wrote a story basically stating that they were in the same ballpark at least. And they they volunteered a lot for that church. And it was very apparent. Now those records were not online. I had to go there. And websites. One is, the most noted one is Ancestry. And that costs, there's a subscription for that, and it costs $200 a year. But with all the bells and whistles, included with that is like $400 a year. And that includes newspapers.com. Newspapers.com is very interesting. Unless you've done this, you simply type in the name of the person that you're looking up, you're researching, and it'll come up with all the articles in the newspapers going back to like 1800. All the newspapers that they scan. That's not by far all the newspapers that have ever been scanned in one site. I use one in New York State that's free to look at because it's called New York State Historic Newspapers. And they have newspapers that newspapers.com doesn't have. So you have to get familiar with different websites with newspapers. But you simply type in the name and you can find out information about, come on in. You can find information about your ancestors. Like I found a great-grandfather who was a dentist in a small town in western New York. And it gave me a lot of information. I was able to write about a 5-paragraph story about him and how he was, and I just simply typed in his name. Now about 90 different articles came up. And unfortunately, about 80% of those articles were John Locke visited his uncle George Locke on such and such a day, or last Saturday or something. And that's, you can't write stories from that. But about 80% of it was like that. Some of those old newspapers are worse than Facebook is today. They tell you every little bit of information that nobody really cares about. But they're very intimate, and they did do an article about his how he went to dental school in Philadelphia, and then he started a practice in this town, and he was very active in the Freemasonry, and he developed something to help pay for dental care for children whose parents couldn't afford dental care. So they did this. This is between 1890 and 1930. He died in 1930, the year he retired. And they did a whole article in 1930 about what his accomplishments were and everything. He got 34.5% Italian, 45.6% East European, Baltic 11.6%, and North and West Europe 8.3%.
I get emails all the time from people who go on Ancestry and are related in some way to me, and they'll send an email and say, did you know this person or you know this person? Because somehow my DNA is linked to theirs, or Francine's is linked to theirs. And of course, they let you know who all the people are that are, and what their relationship, how many, whether they're first, second, third, fourth, fifth cousins, something like that. They give you the name, and generally you can get the email.
Glastonbury, Connecticut.
Send them an email.
I've been there.
Another thing you can do that I did was just, if you have a unique last name, like my last name is unique, that you can just Google it. And if I Google my last name, everything that comes up for my last name are relatives of that came to this country, descendants of people that came to this country from my grandparents. There's nobody else in the United States that I've ever found that is related to us with that last name.
I just want to, I'm sorry. Don sent me this page. And often when you go on newspapers.com, which is an extra subscription for Ancestry, if you go on there, you'll find, this one's 2024, so he got it the old-fashioned way. But you go on, you can find articles, this could say 1924, for all we know, and it would give information about the individual. So I'll pass that around. Yes?
I was curious a number of times to find out where the people are that have the same identical name as me. How does that fit into this discussion?
Well, what's your last name?
Slingerland.
Well, like he said, Google it.
Just Google it,
Just Google it.
and you'll come up with, you won't believe it.
Say Slingerland family. Include the word
I mean,
family.
it's same three in there. My name is Douglas Allen Slingerland. And Allen is spelled three different ways.
Okay. Spelling doesn't count in genealogy.
But just put the last name in. So you can just put the last name in, and that'll, and you'll get all anything that anybody's ever put on the internet with that name.
I'll give
It'll
it a
come
try.
up,